Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video, whatever the opposite of sensation is. Episode 38. We're recording live on November 25th, 2015. I would like to first thank Demise for joining me next week. Don't read your notes, people. And get to YouTube and type in Godless Nerds for more fun. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and Bryce and I know the real meaning of the day. It's when the Nephites gave Joseph Smith his first lightsaber. I would like to thank my patrons, Bobby C. and the No Religion Required podcast, Hugh Man and his manly singing voice, and Teody, before we get started. So now, tonight, we bring on the white-hot ball of charisma himself, Bryce Blankenagel. He left the Mormon church as a teenager, but never lost his spark of curiosity and decided to make his religion, former religion, into the unique American faith that it is, into a show of his own. Could he have been Joseph Smith 200 years ago? I know Mr. Smith couldn't have been Bryce. How are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for the great introduction there. I see all of the things that Joseph Smith does throughout all of my various research, and I'd like to be a reincarnation of him. He had it pretty posh. He had a good life, to say the least.
He did turn it around. I also am impressed by you because I read like 2 paragraphs of text and screwed up like 4 times, and you do 14 pages every episode. And I'm like, how does he do it? Does he do 3, 2, 1 a lot? I don't know. Anyway, it's okay. But
nothing wrong with it though. I don't go to the, I don't have the chutzpah to go live though. I could never do it live because then you would hear all of the times that I fuck up at one single paragraph. Because usually when I record an hour of any content, it takes me about 3 hours to edit down that hour to get it sounding perfect. So whereas going live, you may have like little mess ups here and there, but you just post it, you're done, you're good to go, and you got the show, and it's a lot more organic. Like I'm jealous of being able to do that. I could never handle it.
Well, thanks for being jealous. That'll be one time, but thank you anyway. So, as we said, thanks for coming on tonight, and I've been binge listening to your show for the past week. But can you talk about kind of, we went to the beginning, we get to know the real Bryce. So, what was it like being raised in the Mormon Church, and like how did you wiggle your way out?
What a good-looking question. So being raised in the Mormon Church is really not any different than being raised in any other religious cult or any other religious, any sort of religious sect that has a very insular mindset. I still consider myself culturally Mormon, right? Like people that are secular Jews consider themselves cultural Jews because they grew up with it. They experienced the upbringing underneath this religion of, Mormonism or Judaism. And that's kind of where I see myself. Is I was raised in it. I still have that sense of community that the church instilled in me. I still have a lot of the good things that the church really helps to create and build in a young person. So I carried those with me, but I was able to shrug off all of the stupid bullshit like the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and everything that is also encapsulated in being a Mormon, which there's a lot of crazy shit there.
There truly is. Now, was there an issue with your family because you were kind of young for getting out? I mean, it's almost like when you reached the age of was like 17, 18-ish. Was there a kind of a negative reaction to that?
Definitely. As with any insular religion, when somebody leaves, they're considered, with Scientology, it's a suppressive person. With most other religions, they're an apostate or whatever. And that's the label that I kind of got slapped on is I'm an apostate, right? And it doesn't really hold a whole lot of significance to me anymore. When I was first leaving the church and becoming apathetic, I didn't see myself as apostate because you always classify somebody that is anti-Mormon as an apostate. You never think of people that just stop going. You just call them inactive, not, actively against the church. So, come 16 or so, I just became apathetic. I was bored with church. I didn't want to go every Sunday and then go to all the mutual activities every Wednesday and go. I mean, there's so much more to being a Mormon than just going to church on Sunday. So I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go home teaching, and that's kind of how it all came about. I got my driver's license, and I realized that I wasn't bound to be under the control or the pressure of being in the church anymore, because I had the ability to leave to go do my own thing. And that was kind of the catalyst that drove me to be able to say, yeah, I don't need this in my life anymore. And honestly, since I've left, I've never been happier. I'm a much happier person. When I was younger in the church, it was very depressing phase of my life, and I'm glad to be out. I'm a lot happier in every way, shape, and form now.
Well, I think we're all happier too because you're doing your show. And by the way, this is Soy Cuba here. My I'd like to say free thinking cat, but he's just a cat, and he doesn't really like being on camera, so he's out of here.
He looks like the black cat of the crowd, so I could see why he'd be a free thinker and apostate.
Now, do you still owe tithes, or is that over?
I do not owe tithes anymore. My last tithing settlement. So, for anybody that doesn't know, in the Mormon Church, anybody leaving Mormon goes to their bishopric at the end of every year and does tithing settlement. Basically, it's where your bishop or ward clerk or whatever will print up all of the tithings that you gave that year. And then you sit in front of your bishop or a bishopric member, and they look you dead in the eye and say, is this a full and honest tithe? And if you answer yes, which you're always supposed to answer yes, whether or not it is, then you're good. If you say no, then they say, okay, well, we're going to revoke your temple recommend and some of your privileges in the church until you pay up a full and honest tithe. My last tithing settlement, it was probably when I was 13, 14 years old, I think. And, it's kind of interesting. It's a pleasant thought in my mind that the church still has on record every single penny that I ever gave them. And, that's not records that I have access to or that I have anywhere filed away. But it's nice to know that they know exactly how much I've given them. So maybe, I have this thought just, kind of tickling the back of my mind. I wonder if I could sue them for that money. But probably not, because they have an elite group of amazing lawyers, so it probably wouldn't go anywhere. But how great would that be, being able to sue the church for tithing? Because I didn't get out of the church what I was hoping to get. I didn't get my salvation guaranteed to me. That's what tithing is. So give me my money back, bitches. But whatever.
What's 10% of your income when you're 13?
It was so from a very
income, not net income, because I'm sure you're being taxed.
No. You have to give it on your gross income. It's you pay your tithing on your gross, not your net. Right. So yeah, it's really twisted. But to be honest, I'll be dead honest with you. I remember when I was very, very, very young in the church, and my mom would give my sister and I both, a $5 allowance. And then she would also give us 50 cents above that. And then we would go and we'd grab a tithing slip and a little envelope, and we'd fill out all of the information on the tithing slip. And then we put 0.50 for 10% of the $5 allowance that we got that month. And we'd put it in the little envelope and slip it in the bishop's slot. And, so from the time I was, 5, 6 years old, getting a $5 a month allowance, I was paying tithing on it. Everything I got, every birthday gift money that my grandma gave me, everything, every single penny I ever had, it was all taxed basically by the church.
And we're definitely going to we'd slip it in the bishop's slot as a out of context Twitter quote from the show.
Yes, the bishop's slot is where things go and they're never seen or heard from again.
It's intriguing that the church and the Mormonists definitely have very good records, and you're not allowed to see anything about how they spend their money. I mean, I guess
No.
you could really do some digging, but it would be hard to figure it out. And the people in the church have no idea where the money goes, really.
Yeah, it's just the financial officers and the top echelon that knows where the money goes and how it's divvied out. And even them, I bet they don't know the finer details of it, the finer minutia, because it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation, right? The CEO doesn't know where every single penny of the corporation goes. Even the board of directors doesn't know. I mean, there's records of it, but they don't know right offhand where every little dollar went. So, I mean, they have the biggest skyscraper in Salt Lake City is the church office building, 27 floors or whatever tall. The biggest plot of land in that is under single control in the church is Temple Square, the conference center, and the City Creek Center, which is their $5 billion shopping complex. So there's a lot of crazy shit in the church finances that nobody really knows about. And luckily, one of my favorite Mormon authors, Mormon scholars named H. Michael Marquardt, is apparently working on a book that covers the church's financials. And when that thing comes out, I think there's going to be a lot of big questions that the church has to answer. But I don't know. I don't know what's going into the book. I don't know anything about it yet. So we'll just have to wait and see when it comes out.
And you'll hear it first on Naked Mormonism.
Fucking A, right.
I will, because, well, where else am I going to hear that information? So is there a way, as someone who's been in the church, to do like an elevator speech? Can you describe the Mormon religion as someone who's never watched South Park and knows nothing about the faith?
Can I? It's Christianity 2.0. That's the best I can say, or maybe Judaism 3.0, right? So you have Judaism and then Christianity, and then tacked on top of that, you have Mormonism. It's the Third Testament. It's all about how Jesus came over to America and proselyted to the people that were living in America, the natives at the time. Apparently, the natives came over from Jerusalem, which anybody that listens to the most recent episode that I released was, a deconstruction of the Book of Mormon. They'll know it's all fucking hogwash. It's stupid, completely and utterly ridiculous. But there's, that's kind of the elevator speech. It's just Christianity, maybe 2.0 or 3.0, because it's just tacked onto the top of normal Christianity.
Yeah, I think in one of your episodes you mentioned it was a lot like having a kind of a celebrity do a commercial for your company to give that celebrity's credibility. So you gave the credibility of Christianity, which is kind of stealing from Judaism, on top of that, and automatically like, hey, we've got this going for us. Even though the stories are quite amazing. I mean, I listened to your show in a weird order. I'll be open. I listened to the last show first, so I listened to your 7.5 hour show. So hardcore history. You guys better step it up to catch up to this. But your first show, I think it worked out well for me, because I listened to your first show and it was 7.5 hours, but it was dense with information. And it was a very laid back, not a lot of personal commentary, just taking apart the book in a very methodical way. Then I went back and listened to episode 1, and you're more playful, giving no fucks, and being very passionate in how you feel about how the church treats people. So how is that for you, making that kind of transition, doing these, as you mark them in the shows, CC, kind of non-cursing, not as much commentary shows, as opposed to your earlier shows where you're saying how you feel very often?
Actually, that's you were introduced to the show the way that I would like everybody to be introduced to it, because I think if you want to get a proper feel for what the show is about, listening to that clean cut CC, the Book of Mormon, is a great way to understand kind of the feeling of the show, right? But the show is set up in a chronological format. So episode 1 starts out with the birth of Joseph Smith, December 23rd, 1805 in Sharon, Vermont. And now by episode 24, we have the Book of Mormon is released, and Joseph Smith is moving out to Kirtland, Ohio, to work with Sidney Rigdon in creating the church. So The way that you're digesting the show is exactly how I want everybody else to digest the show. Is, understand what the show is about by listening to that huge Motherload episode, and then going back and listening from episode 1 up to that episode, so you kind of get a feel for the difference in what the episodes types will be. So to explain, the CC, the clean cut versions, those will just be periodically done, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and I'll try and take on one big problem in Mormon history or Mormon doctrine and just deconstruct it from a completely objective, non-biased perspective as much as possible, add very little commentary, very little personal experience. But the rest of the show, I mean, every other episode, I tend to add in a lot of my own personal experience about being in Mormonism and what it was like to grow up in it. And like when I come across a doctrine that comes out through the history and I realize, oh, that's where that doctrine came from, I tend to comment on it like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This is how what happened in history applies to believing Mormons today. And of course I say fuck a lot because I'm really pissed off at being lied to for so long. And yeah, so that's kind of the difference in the dichotomy. You have the normal episodes that are just episode 1, 2, 3 up through 24 right now. And then you have special edition episodes, which are usually discussions with people, ex-Mormons or people that are, are specialized in some way. Like one of them was with David Fitzgerald, who wrote The Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion, the book one, The Mormons. And, it was a fun discussion with him because we were able to bounce history off of each other for a while. And it was just a lot of fun. But now this third subset of episode type would be these clean cuts where I'm hoping to take on some very interesting topics.
Yeah, I read David Fitzgerald's book, and that you hit so much stuff that wasn't in there. But the more you hear the story of the origin of Mormonism, you just go, wow, I feel like 1,000 things had to happen for it to become what it is today. And if one hadn't worked, it would have not existed.
And that's the thing about David Fitzgerald's book is he rips through at lightning speed. He's just skimming over the tops of major topics that happened in the church, and he doesn't really offer a whole lot of context of it. He just tells the basic timeline of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, he covers a lot of things in really great depth, and then of course the episode or the book, at the end of it, he basically says, if you ever encounter missionaries, don't be a dick. If you want to talk to Mormons, talk to them, be nice, don't ridicule them, don't say that their beliefs are crazy or that their history is full of skeletons. Just be a very, very nice person when you're talking to believing Mormons. And that's the thing is, you can write one single volume, one single book about the Mormon religion, but you can only just skim the surface of any single topics. You can't dive deep into each topic, each time frame, like my show does. I mean, each of my episodes usually cover 2 to 3 month period of time, whereas the entire book of David Fitzgerald's book covered 130 years or so in 350 pages. So there's kind of a difference in the depth of scholarship there.
That is true, but I read the book and I find it a quality book, so check it out, everybody. But we want to talk. I mean, that's one of the purposes of me doing this show, is to talk about podcasts and the people behind it. So what made you think, hey, I want to do one of these podcasts and get it going? And how did it kind of get started?
That's actually a really good question. For a long time, I left the church and I really didn't give half a shit about the history or what the church was about, right? It was just, I was an ex-Mormon and so be it. I didn't give a fuck. So I started talking with my buddy that was it's Christian, and not so much Christian anymore. And we would get in these discussions about Mormonism, and he would assert all the time that Mormonism isn't Christianity. I'm like, dude, Jesus Christ is in the name. I don't know what you're talking about here. So we would have these discussions about the finer tenets of Mormonism, and he would bring up topics that I realized I knew nothing about. So he gave me some sources to look up and some places to go find the information that he was relaying to me, and that's when I kind of started falling down the rabbit hole and realizing I wasn't in Kansas anymore, right? There's so much there that I never knew existed. Growing up in the church, I had heard these names of Sidney Rigdon, of Oliver Cowdery, of Joseph Smith, all of these important names, but they were just amorphous, like cardboard cutouts of these people. I never knew any details or what their actual role was in the church. So as I started doing research on it, I started also listening just on the side to atheist podcasts. Dogma Debate, Cognitive Dissonance, Scathing Atheist was my first one, and I fucking loved it, right? And I realized, there's not really anybody that is just taking on the history of Mormonism right now. There's Mormon Stories, there's Mormon Expression, there's a few of them that are Mormon podcasts that deal with doctrine in the church, but none of them like bring the history to life in the way that people understand history, as storytelling from chronological order. Something starts to happen, it happens, and then you see the repercussions of it happening. So as I was starting to do research and seeing the genesis of Mormonism and of Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon and how everything was intertwined with everything else, and as these names, Sidney Rigdon and Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith, started to gain a lot more prominence in my life, I was like, man, there's a lot of really crazy shit that happened in the church and nobody talks about it. So that's when I was like, I wonder how hard it would be to make a podcast about this. And well, I cranked out 5 episodes and got some very sound advice from David Michael of the My Book of Mormon podcast, and well, the show has gotten to what it is today after a year's worth of work.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that we're getting you at the anniversary. So anybody listening to this down the road, this is about the time that the first anniversary show appeared. So yeah, happy anniversary.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And
that's,
go ahead.
I was going to say that's what I was wanting to do with this anniversary episode. So many times I take on one topic, or like in a normal episode, I'll be taking on a 2 or 3 month period of time and talking about all of the events that are intertwined in there. And so much gets left on the cutting room floor because there's so much more information there that I just can't contain in a single episode and have it still be coherent. I have to either break it up and put the stuff that's left on the cutting room floor into the next episode, or just jettison it completely. And that was something that frustrated me so much about this anniversary episode. It was a 7.5 hour deconstruction of the Book of Mormon, and I could have easily gone 3 or 4 more hours just on the topics that I was talking about without diving any deeper into any other topics. I mean, I had actually scripted almost 2 more hours worth of content that I was like, I can't include this or the episode will be too bulky, too cumbersome, and nobody will want to listen to it. So I added in the 2 interviews, one with David Michael, one with Rachel Brown, and yeah, the episode ended up at the 7.5 hour mark, and I was like, holy shit, I hope people will listen to it. And, I'm kind of glad people are. And I've had some feedback of people saying, I wish it was longer. So now I know for the future, maybe I can make some 10-hour episodes and see how they go.
Yeah, that would actually make Dogma Debate a little bit jealous. 10 hours? Whoa!
Right? Yeah, and that's for anybody that is listening before the broadcast-a-thon this year, I'm actually planning on going down to the 24-hour broadcast that Dogma Debate does. They did their first one last year, and I think they're going to make it an annual tradition, and I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun.
Was David Michael in Dallas last year, right? So are you going down? Is that what you're saying? You're going to be in Dallas?
Yes. He was in Dallas last year, and I'm planning on flying down as well, and I think he's going to as well. I'm not 100% sure. Things are still a little up in the air right now. That's going to be December 12th through the 13th that it's broadcasting. Looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of the people there, other podcasters, other people that are in the atheist activism, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll get to your frenemy status shortly, but I'm already behind, so I want to do my live read number 1. So here it is. Do I give enough love to No Religion Required? After all, they have thousands of fans and don't need my out-of-context Twitter quotes to harm their brand. That's fine. They're good people, and for the second straight week in a row, Ashley hit it right in the feels when she talked about the people for which she is thankful, not just in podcasting, but in life, which I hear is important. They also had Jeremiah Kamara on the show this week. Check that interview out to hear about what church has done or not done, more accurately, for the African-American community. So we'll try a little transition here. So the Mormon Church...
Hang on. I'm sorry. Before the transition, I just got to say, personally, I went to ReasonCon this in April this year, and I met Bobby and Ashley, and they are two of the nicest people in the world. They got the biggest hearts in podcasting. And I mean, I just got to say, I absolutely love Bobby and Ashley. They're such great people. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think we said hi, but that was about it. I felt a little, I don't know if it was starstruck or just the fact that I met probably 100 people in person who I had known sort of online before the fact. So I guarantee I was like, there's so many people I could have talked to, but I just didn't have time, or I was too intimidated, or, you know, there were some big time people. But in any case, yes, we have met in person, but, you know, so we're a little bit, you're in Colorado, right?
I'm in Colorado, yeah.
So we're and they're not doing it next year, sadly. But I guess Reason Rally for everybody, if that's what we're going to do. It could be a pretty crazy party. But I mentioned, well, that's okay. Transitions do what they do. So the Mormon Church is, as we all know, a long-standing ally of the African-American community. I only binge listened to about, I think I got to 11 episodes of your show in the past week. So could you enlighten us or me as to the church's revelation from God in 1978?
Happy to do it. So if you read the Book of Mormon, you'll notice that there's 2 or 3 times in there where it explicitly says that black people are basically of the devil, right? People with black skin have the mark of Cain. They're evil. They're loathsome. And when okay, it doesn't detail much beyond that. It just says that people with black skin are the dark and loathsome, whereas people with white skin are, white and delightsome. The Book of Mormon is great for that. You get that in, I think it's 3 instances total. But if you really, really want to dive into the crazy racist screeds that came out of Joseph Smith's mind, you got to go into the Pearl of Great Price. So the Pearl of Great Price is a combination of a few revelations that came from Joseph Smith, in addition to the Book of Abraham, which came from these from these papyri that Joseph Smith brought from a traveling salesman. And in there, it talks about how basically black people will be the slaves of the celestial kingdom. Anybody that's righteous enough will be raised and lifted to the celestial kingdom, and anybody that is a non-married woman or not married in the temple or has black skin will basically be the servants or the slaves of the people that are in the celestial kingdom. So the church has been fighting this for a long time. Brigham Young was a vehement racist. I mean, God, he said some really, really evil, angry shit about black people, and he is a very evil person. People called him Bloody Brigham for a lot of reasons. So fast forward 150 years and you get to the 1960s and 1970s, where you start having racial equality movements throughout all of America. And let's be clear, Mormonism is an American religion. It's all about how great America is, how Jesus came over to America, how the Garden of Eden was actually in America. I mean, it's all about how awesome America is. So it's kind of been subject to the societal dictates of what has been happening in America, and as people as segregation rallies were happening to abolish segregation, separate but equal, as racial equality was a really big topic of conversation. people in the church and outside the church started saying, hey, so our collective morality as a society is moving beyond racism in general, but the Mormon religion still considers people with black skin evil no matter what, and the more righteous they are, the lighter their skin gets. So in that respect, Michael Jackson has got to be the most righteous motherfucker on the planet, right? But that being said, in 1978 through 79, there were a lot of pressures on the Mormon Church about these very, very racist ideals that they had in their doctrine. And come 1979, there was I don't remember what school it was, but they boycotted the BYU football team and they refused to play them because there were black people on the team, and they realized how racist the Mormon Church was, and they said, we will not play against you until you lift the ban on blacks having priesthood, basically. So the priesthood is how you get into the celestial kingdom. Blacks couldn't have the priesthood, so blacks just couldn't get into the celestial kingdom. That was the line of logic. So 1979 comes along, and the church gets a lot of pressure from different colleges saying, we won't play BYU until you lift the ban. And lo and behold, a very timely revelation is passed down from God through the first presidency of the church that says, oh, blacks can have the priesthood. We're totally not racist anymore. And all that 150 years, 60 years behind us, just don't worry about it. Don't look at that. We don't care about that. And I was hoping that they would do the same kind of thing with gays right now, but as we can see with headlines recently, they've kind of just dug in a little bit deeper instead of becoming more progressive. But I guess we'll see how that all ends up. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm a graduate at University of Missouri, so they played BYU a couple weeks ago, and it's like, they got black players now. Look at them.
They found some somewhere in Utah. I can't believe it. There's actually black people there. Unbelievable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So can we talk about this? It's gonna be hard to talk in depth since we only have a certain amount of time to talk. But how do we get into Joseph Smith as the person? Because in the Mormon Church, he's considered on the same level as Jesus and maybe God. But who is he as a person? And it seems like you have this actual appreciation for what he was able to accomplish, especially considering it was the early 19th century when he was able to convince people that he was a prophet of God.
Well, okay. So I just have to say, I'm endlessly fascinated with the history of the Mormon religion. That's why I do this podcast. But Joseph Smith, beyond just the history of the church itself, Joseph Smith as a human being is somebody that is a topic that will never, ever get old in my examination. He is such a crazy fucking wild card that just did whatever the fuck he wanted to, and basically went unchecked in creating a religious caliphate until he died in a gunfight in 1844. So Joseph Smith founded the religion in 1830. And that was in New York at the time, Palmyra, Fayette, Colesville, a couple of different towns in New York. So there were these three congregations, and Joseph Smith was kind of trying to run these congregations, and he was doing this through this very magnetic, charismatic personality. And that's something that I can't quite convey on the show, no matter how much I talk about Joseph Smith, because he's such a fascinating guy. I can't ever get sick of studying him because all of the shit he did was so fucking crazy, right? So he was very magical and fanciful and visionary, and he had all these crazy ideas about God and reality, and it was all different. It was all from Joseph's mind, but it was all a product. But let me be clear, Joseph Smith was a product of the society he was raised in. So this burned over district that he lived in New York when the Book of Mormon came out was, I mean, it went through tons of religious revivals, and those affected Joe on a very deep center. Um, the the church touts this idea of, Joseph Smith was going to these different congregations of churches to see which one was true. So finally, in 1820, as a 14-year-old boy, he went out into the woods and he prayed to God to ask which church was the one true church. And of course, God and Jesus appeared as separate corporeal beings and descended from the heavens in a pillar of white, and they were white and delightsome, floating over his head. And they told him that none of the churches were true, but he was going to restore the original church that Jesus brought to the earth, and bring it about in these latter days. So you have this man with very visionary ideas of how the world is. He has a magic worldview where he thinks he's hunting for treasure, and there's literally guardian spirits of these treasures that suck them further into the earth while they're hunting for them. And he morphs this into an idea of, well, maybe I can pull a treasure from the ground that is actually religious plates of the ancient inhabitants of the Americas. And you see this. Fuck, we don't have enough time to talk about this. I'm going on so many tangents because I can't think of the right thing to talk about here. But you see the formation of Joseph Smith's mind and how the Book of Mormon came about. And then you examine the Book of Mormon as being authored from Joseph Smith, as opposed to translated by Joseph Smith and authored from ancient inhabitants of America from, 1400 years before Joseph Smith lived. And you start to understand that he was a very crazy but very magnetic person that people loved to talk to, or they hated because he was constantly lying to their face. And I mean, he was a slimy little worm. He anytime that he came up with any or came up against any legal precedent against what he was doing, he was able to slip out and weasel out of the situations. And I'm not making a lot of sense because I'm so fascinated by this guy, and he's there's so many different angles to look at the dynamic individual that was Joseph Smith. So I'll stop the sentence there because I don't know what else to talk about there.
And it is hard to imagine just the world that he grew up in. I mean, like early 19th century, you kind of had to make your own entertainment. So he was telling tales to his family when he was growing up. And I think that was kind of leading up to now. I'm trying to wonder, that was one of the things I wanted to bring up, is like, so Joseph Smith lived now, would he be doing podcasts? Would he be running a mega church? Would he be in? I just don't know where he would fit exactly, but it'd be intriguing.
I would say it would depend on where he was at the time, because Joseph Smith craved knowledge. He was like a lot of people that are in the skeptical movement, where if they hear something new that they've never heard before, they want to go and do research on it as much as possible. They want to find books, they want to find articles, they want to find anything new information about this they possibly can in order to understand what is going on at the time. And Joseph Smith was just like that. When something was happening, Joseph Smith would seek out books or publications or newspaper articles to find out what was really going on. And that's what he did. And we can see that reflected through the Book of Mormon in various authorship studies to see the books that it was plagiarized from. And then we can read the books that it was plagiarized from and see the themes that were running through those and what was most fascinating to Joseph Smith at the time. Of course, the War of 1812 was something that was on Joseph's mind very much. And if anybody listens to the 7.5-hour marathon episode, they will have heard and understand everything that I'm talking about right now. But the late War of 1812 was a book that Joseph Smith, or a textbook that was used in schools, that Joseph Smith drew a lot of information from about the British War in America in 1812, which was an unbelievably crazy war from 1812 to 1815. And then also, of course, Napoleon Bonaparte was somebody that was a very fascinating individual to Joseph Smith, of course, because he was the world conqueror at the time. He was the Hitler of Joseph's time. He was, he was this very evil, amorphous dictator that was conquering European, African, and Asian continents that was, scorching the earth behind him. So, Joseph Smith was all about finding these topics that were happening in current events and saying, what is actually going on? Let me read a book or two on this. And of course, because he was raised in such a poor household with very, very little resources and means, if he got a book, he probably read the book dozens of times because his family didn't have enough money to buy very many books for him. So if he got a hold of one, he probably devoured it multiple times just for entertainment's sake. Yeah, and that's something that fascinates me so much about him. We have the internet. We can go Google something, and that leads us down a rabbit trail of link clicking and finding information about, multiple topics. Joseph Smith was able to read one or two books every few months, maybe, or every year. And, he devoured the information multiple times, I would assume.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of absorbing. And we've actually reached the time for live read 2. I think you'll like this one. So if you want to hear the Book of Mormon as Joseph Smith intended it, you should check out David Michael's My Book of Mormon podcast as he reads the book from start to finish, offering sometimes drunken commentary as it came to pass. And he doesn't do all that annoying research that bogs Bryce down. And now the two of them have joined forces. So let's go into that. So how did you and David decide to kind of unite and podcast together?
Actually, that's a really good question. So, like I said earlier, when I was first creating the show, I did 5 episodes, and I did 3 episodes, and I sent them over to David Michael and said, "Hey, what do you think about them?" And he gave me some really good pointers, and then I created a couple more episodes, and then I released 5 of them all at once on the very first release date. From then on, the show just kind of, as I was putting out episodes every 2 weeks, the show just started growing and growing and growing more and more. David and I started sharing audience more because a lot of his audience are ex-Mormons that want to hear somebody that doesn't know anything about the Mormonism or the Book of Mormon read the Book of Mormon, right? So a lot of the people that were listening to his show started dabbling over into my show to see what it was about. And then, of course, David Michael eventually finished the Book of Mormon, and he went on to read the Pearl of Great Price. And that was cool, right? Hearing his take on Joseph Smith's direct revelations and the really, really crazy shit that came out of Joseph's mind, hearing him happen upon the doctrine of Kolob, and he's like, I thought Kolob was a joke. I didn't know it was a real thing. That was, so fucking hilarious because, he's a funny guy, right? He has, he has the ability to draw a crowd. So eventually he got to the point where the last Mormon book left to read is the Doctrine and Covenants. And the Doctrine and Covenants are bloody fucking boring. They are just a bullet point list of what people are supposed to do in the church in order to create the church. So with Muhammad, you have him revealing the Quran, right? And then you have the hadiths that are tacked onto the Quran, basically, that dictate what the actual religion is supposed to be about. And that's where you have a lot of different splits in Islam, is which hadiths you include or which one or how the hadiths are incorporated. Well, that's what the Doctrine and Covenants is to the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon was the ideas of a madman put onto paper, and of course a madman in this case was Joseph Smith, but they don't have a whole lot of details about how to actually run a church. So he released the Book of Mormon, started the church, and then he realized, oh shit, there is a lot of stuff that I need to that I need to organize in the church in order to run it. So I'll just create divine revelations from God in order to address these problems that are happening. So that's what the Doctrine and Covenants is. Whenever there's a challenge that comes up to Joseph Smith or the doctrine or whatever, he comes up with a new revelation that solves the problem, and then he moves on. And that's the revelations are just set out in somewhat chronological format from when the church was organized to after Joseph died. And that's how the Doctrine and Covenants are set up. So that's how we kind of got our start. Was if David Michael were to try and read the Doctrine and Covenants straight up, none of it would make any sense. It'd just be a crazy, boring, stupid bullet point list of how to do stuff. But when I'm on the show, I'm able to introduce the history behind what was happening that facilitated Joseph needing to reveal whatever is contained in what we're reading. So if there's something going on, like Martin Harris, as I call him, Not So Smarty Marty, he took the 116 pages home, showed them to his wife, and then he ended up losing them. Well, he came back to Joseph Smith and said, hey, you know, I lost the plates, or I lost the Book of Lehi, the transcript. And Joseph Smith came up with a revelation saying, well, okay, I guess I don't have the gift to translate anymore until Oliver Cowdery comes along to help me translate. So that was how he solved it, through divine revelation through God. And let's be completely clear, he did those revelations in the same way that he revealed the Book of Mormon. Just by taking his favorite precious rock and throwing it in his Mr. Hat stovepipe white top hat, and he'd come up with the revelation. Somebody would write it down for him. So, I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same with Joseph Smith, really.
Yeah, I think that's something that there's just too many questions flying and in my head to catch up with all of them. But the whole concept of the seer stone, how does that work, and where did he get the whole idea for, I have a rock and I throw it in a hat and it helps me see things?
That's a really fucking good question. So there's a couple places, right? So you have Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith used the rock in a dark place trick, and of course the darkest place that he could find was in his hat. There was other methods, cupping it in your hands and putting it over your face or whatever. There were other methods, but that was his favorite method. Oliver Cowdery was a diviner, right? He had divining rods of witch hazelwood that he would hold in his hands, and they would lead him to where he was going. And I remember being in Scouts when I was young, we actually practiced with divining rods. But yes,
You practice a lot.
yes,
I have my divining rod. It's a bottle of beer, and it's pointing me toward another beer bottle that's actually full, because this one's empty.
Touche to that. Yes, you would be an expert diviner. So Oliver Cowdery's dad and Joseph Smith's dad were members of the same like treasure-seeking cult, basically, that were using these magic tricks. Some of them used like dangling watches, pocket watches, and they would lead them to where they wanted to go, or they would use compasses that were shrouded in weird stuff. I mean, they were crazy motherfuckers. So I think that's where Joseph Smith kind of picked up the idea. But there's also this story that we've picked up of a woman named Sally Chase. So there were these two brothers, Mason Chase and I can't remember his brother's name. Names elude me a lot, but I know the story. So, and this is where Joseph Smith got the special rock, Precious, out of this Chase well. When they were digging this well for water, they found this really unique, interesting looking rock, and Joseph Smith was like, I gotta have that fucking rock. Well, the way that he found that was, he went to the Chase's brother's sister named Sally, and she had a bright emerald green rock that she would use to do the same trick that Joseph was doing. And Joseph saw her throwing the rock in, I don't know if she was using a hat or what, and he said, hey, can I try that? That looks really interesting. And he used her rock to scry for himself, to see what he could see, buried under the ground. And at that point, when he used her rock, he saw his favorite rock that was buried in the Mason well, and said, that rock is way more powerful and way cooler than the rock that you have, Sally. So ha ha ha. So that's kind of how Joseph Smith got the entire idea of scrying, which that's SCRYING. Anybody that plays MMORPGs or anything will know that that's what you use to look for treasure, or to see in areas or that you can't see in League of Legends or whatever. So these scrying stones were what were used as just treasure seeking materials, and Joseph Smith kind of got to start with those, and he started convincing people to agree with him and buy whatever the fuck he was selling. And well, now we're talking about Mormonism, all basically from this stone. So thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Sally, for turning him onto it.
I know, and it never seemed like he was able to find anything when he was using that stone, but somehow people still like agreed with him and go, "Oh, that sounds good, legit."
Yeah, he was tricky though. He was really, really tricky. So Joseph Smith, when he was 8 years old, had an operation on his leg. He had, I think it was typhoid, and they had to scrape away some bone tissue on his leg. And it was a horrible operation that warped the mind of Joseph Smith from a very young age. And you feel bad for him because it would have been a very horrible and terrifying time at the age of 8 years old when these doctors were trying this experimental procedure on him with no alcohol, with no pain number of any kind, with no anesthesia whatsoever. They cut open his leg, filleted open the flesh, found the infected bone tissue, scraped it away, and there was a chunk of his leg missing for the rest of his life. So he was limping for his entire life. But this entire period of recovery of multiple years, he was incapable of doing a lot of physical tasks like his brother and his father and his friends were able to do. So Joseph Smith was kind of tasked with, okay, you go sit over here, you put your rock in your hat, and you look for the treasure, and you tell us where to dig, and we'll dig. And that's kind of what Joseph Smith did. So you begin to kind of empathize with him, as that's kind of what he did. He manufactured this idea basically out of necessity, because he was physically incapable of doing anything else but just sitting with his fucked up leg and telling the people where to dig for treasure. So you kind of see that that's a little bit of a causation factor that made him such a good scryer, that made him so believable. So he would go, he would tell people where to find these treasures, and they'd be digging, and they would, hit on something solid or whatever, or they thought was something solid. And of course they would think, oh, we finally found the treasure chest, or we found the gold or whatever. And then they would furiously dig for a minute, and they would realize that the treasure had somehow sunk deeper into the earth. And, they would just do that over and over constantly. We have multiple firsthand accounts of people commenting on how weird it was that there are holes just everywhere dug into the ground near Joseph Smith's home. I mean, there was just people were walking by on the street and just seeing hills that were covered in holes, pockmarked like a moonscape almost with holes. And they're like, what the fuck is happening here? Well, it turns out Joseph Smith was telling these people where to go dig these holes. And we're not talking just, 10 feet down or anything. We're talking holes that ranged from, a couple of feet deep and a couple feet wide to being entire caverns that multiple people could go into a hillside. And there would be a room in there, basically. You see that played out in Comora's cave. They would dig into the ground a tunnel, and then dig out a huge room inside the, after they dug the tunnel that was 20 feet in diameter or 30 feet in diameter. These huge holes that multiple people could be digging and working in. And they were using, Joseph and all of his buddies were using their stones or their stone sight or second sight, and they would see all these wonderful treasures that were there buried in the ground, but none of them actually existed. They might have found an arrowhead or two, but that was about it. Yeah, but he was good at it.
Yeah, he was able to make the best out of every situation.
Oh, yeah.
As you are, as an ex-Mormon. So could you talk about how you're kind of giving back and giving some of your extra patron money to like ex-Mormon causes?
Definitely. So the Patreon up to this point, up until this anniversary, has been, I've donated half of everything that I get from the Patreon to an organization called Holding Out Help, or multiple other causes that seem very worthy. And holding out help, basically what they do is they help Mormons that are in polygamist sects, the FLDS, transition out into the real world by giving them a place to live, giving them an education. They're a really, really good organization. There's been a lot of other causes, like a person named Caitlin McKenna. Sorry, the name escaped me for a minute. Like I said, I'm bad with names. And she basically got kicked out of her parents' house because she didn't believe in the church anymore. And if anybody wants to know about that, you can go on.
Oh, we got radio silence from Bryce. Yeah, Caitlin McKenna, she was talked about on an episode of, I think it was Barroom Atheist, who talked about her, and then it got on to No Religion Required. Actually, No Religion Required posted the interview that Bill did with her, I think at the Pennsylvania Secular Conference, and it kind of made the rounds. And I think it was the beginning of the I Am Fourth with David Somali of Dogma Debate. So now we have Bryce on, but he's silent. Let me send him a message here. This is technology. This is live radio, everybody. That's how it goes sometimes. Apparently, the ghost of Joseph Smith had enough of his nonsense and decided to, give him the boot. The magical stone finally worked out. And really, listen, if I know you think, 7.5-hour show, I can't possibly listen to it. Well, listen to it in pieces. It isn't necessarily broken down to smaller. I mean, there are kind of smaller bits in it. There are timestamps that he has on that episode, so you can see the different parts he has in the show. But it's really a show that you should check out because it's kind of gives you. I'd say it's like half of an audiobook, really. I mean, if you listen to an audiobook, you're talking 15, 20 hours, and this is 7.5 hours, and it is dense. It has great interviews, and it has great information, so it's something you should really check out. And it is nice to hear, as someone personally looking for my own cause, that Bryce is able to help out ex-Mormons, because I know one of the hardest things to do is to leave a religion because you have this automatic community. I mean, Bryce mentioned how the Mormon community, for whatever the background is, very supportive of the people there. And there he is.
My apologies. That was I have a demon that runs around inside of my computer. I'm kind of like Bobby and Miss Ashley and Jeremiah. There's always technical
equipment issues. Oh no, issues.
Equipment issues. Anyway, yes. So I don't know exactly what you said up to this point, but yeah. So the up until this point, the show is the Patreon has been going to a very, very worthy cause. However, I just kind of restructured it and changed it to be more beneficial to the listeners. At this point, I have come to a crossroads where I can continue to keep my day job and kill myself by producing the podcast, or I can quit the day job and really, really engage in creating content for the internet about Mormon history. And I've decided to do the latter. The latter. So I've changed it so the Patreon is just going to supporting basically living expenses for myself, so I'm able to produce a podcast full time, and in addition to that, produce 2 books. So if anybody is interested, they can go to GoFundMe.com/6months2books, and that's the GoFundMe that I've set out. The deal is, if you give me 6 months of living expenses, I will give you 2 books worth. The first book is going to be the history of the Mormon Church from Joseph Smith's birth leading up to producing the Book of Mormon. And then the second book will be a deconstruction of the Book of Mormon itself. And that's kind of the deal. If I can, at the end of 6 months, if the podcast and if the books have created enough of a living wage, I will continue to create more and better and more professional content. If not, if at the end of 6 months I'm incapable of supporting myself, then I'll go back and I'll get a day job, and then, I'll just scale back on content creation, which is okay. It's in the listener's hands, basically. If you guys want more Naked Mormonism, all you have to do is go sign up at patreon.com or gofundme.com/6months2books. Of course, patreon.com/Naked Mormonism, and you can sign up to help it, help me to have living expenses covered so I can spend all of my time focused on creating Mormon history that's accessible, interesting, and presented in a way that everybody can understand it.
See, unfortunately, Bryce can't do the whole "I have a revelation from God, you should give me money" thing. So he actually has to convince you with good arguments and good content. And hey, it's worked for me so far. So I'll be supporting for sure. So this is funny because this is the part where I'm like, hey, pimp yourself, talk about where people can find your show. But I think you've done that. But hey, there's always more, right?
All right, absolutely. They can check out the Facebook page. There's somebody that is absolutely amazing person that goes by the screen name Demonista, and she runs a Facebook page for me and posts way more content on there than I could ever cover in a single episode of Naked Mormonism. So if you want to dive way deeper into lots of history and crazy Mormon shit, including current events, check out the Facebook page Naked Mormonism. You can always tweet at Naked Mormonism or check out the website nakedmormonismpodcast.com, or just check it out on iTunes and Stitcher. That's where you'll find the bulk of the content. That's a good place to go, or any other podcast listening vehicle of choice. I'd love to get new subscribers. That really helps out with the show and helps spread the good word. So yeah, that's you can find me pretty much anywhere. Google Naked Mormonism or Bryce Blankenagel. You can find me.
And give one of them 5-star ratings on iTunes. I hear that's something that people like. So give them some love, man.
That's right. I love you back. I promise. I love you so much.
Exactly. From Colorado, man. Anyway, so I will do my little bit here. You can follow me on Twitter, Zachrilege. There it is, right in front of you. You can spell it Zachrilege on Twitter. Like my Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. And this week I'll actually look at it. I actually missed an email or two for Wrath. By the way, the For Wrath podcast, I'll be on there next Monday night, and I think we'll be drinking a beer from Tampa, so that should be fun. So thanks to Bryce for being on tonight. Just want to tell everybody to stay safe, and if you need to chat, I'm available. And if you feel that you're an atheist and you're alone and you are not alone, reach out. Let's chat and get that human connectiveness that keeps people coming back every Sunday to church, because we don't need it. So stay skeptical, everybody, and I love y'all, and we will say good night.